we are joined now by the Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Leon Schreiber. Good morning. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina. Good morning to the viewers.
So, Minister, as you heard there, top of mind for many South Africans is the corruption at Home Affairs and, of course, illegal foreigners in the country. So let's just start with the corruption at Home Affairs and how are you faring with actually dealing with those within the employ of the department who are guilty of corruption?
Well, just recently we put out some information showing that around 30 officials had been disciplined over these past 3 months. That included 2 prosecutions. It included a number of officials who had been taken various disciplinary steps, including dismissal. And of course, we continue to work closely with the Special Investigating Unit to make sure that we implement the recommendations from the Lubisi report. We saw the imprisonment of one official for 12 years recently, another one for 5 years. And so this train continues to really chug along. But I think the really important point to make about corruption, as really about everything else in the Home Affairs space, is that digital transformation is the solution. Because when I came into office, I was not interested only in treating symptoms and trying to understand, going on trying to put out fires constantly. I wanted to understand the root cause. Why is it possible for someone to steal someone else's identity, for example? Why is it possible for officials to engage in corruption in exchange for money? And the answer to that is actually very simple. It's because, as you can see on the screen right now, we have paper-based processes. We have manual processes where human beings get involved and then they can take your file and put it under the desk. They can extract bribes from you in exchange for service. That is why our apex priority is digital transformation, where we create a fully digital system that can be accessed online, but that is completely closed to interaction from the outside. That is what we've done in South Africa when it comes to online banking. It's what we've done with the South African Revenue Service. And that, too, is how we're going to clamp down on corruption in Home Affairs, not by treating the symptoms, but by making the cause impossible.
So your predecessor, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, also spoke about this. But how far along is this process in the department? And how long do you think it's going to take before it is fully digitized?
Well, Home Affairs is way behind the curve. That's the truth. In many cases, these processes look like they still come from the 1980s. We recently saw the case of these Libyan nationals who came into South Africa on handwritten paper documents, visas. That is something that belongs in a prior age of civilization. It's completely unacceptable. So, of course, the rollout of smart IDs and passports is something that happened around 2013. But since then, it seems to me like the department has fallen behind. And so what we need to do is just rapidly accelerate that process, not only to catch up and digitize everything that we do, but also to then move beyond. We want to become really world-class in how we embrace technology at Home Affairs. And we've got examples, and this is a really important point. If you look at a country like Kenya, Kenya has created an e-citizen platform where you can access 3,000 government services online, including all of the services that we associate with Home Affairs. They've also completely digitized their visa system. You no longer even speak of visas. You have an electronic travel authorization. And that is the kind of model we have right here in Africa that South Africa needs to catch up, because the truth is we're being left behind, not only in Home Affairs, but if we look at our paper-based, antiquated systems really across government.
And of course, as you say, we need to catch up, but it needs to go beyond the rhetoric at this point, because we are in 2024. There has been for the longest time great technology available that could assist with things like corruption, because you think of something as simple as blockchain technology and how that would actually ensure that there are fingerprints along the way to see who did what at which stage in that chain. So it would be easier to basically root out the corruption in that instance, because you would know exactly which official in the department did what at which stage of an application.
Sakina, you could not be more right. And I would go beyond that to say, if we look at the possibilities of machine learning, the ability to teach and train a computer to identify a fraudulent document, for example, is way beyond what human capacity has. But I take your point. This is not something that fell out of the sky. It's been there. The question is, why have we not embraced it? And that is what we've really been working on, in addition to the many reforms we've rolled out over the last 3 months, is getting to the root of how we actually reposition the department so that it's able to actually embrace technology. So what we've done is we've put together, obviously, a vision. We're busy. We've called it Home Affairs at Home, and we've really, I think, pulled in the same direction now to say that we want to use technology so that you don't have to go to Home Affairs. Whether you're a visitor or a South African, you should interact with us online. We are now busy embedding that, of course, into our 5-year strategic plan and into our annual performance plan for the next year. And then I think the budgeting process that follows will be very important so that we reprioritize in our budget. And then the other thing that's really important, of course, is the regulatory environment. And I do want to raise this one as a major obstacle for digital transformation, not only to Home Affairs, but actually across government. And that is our use of the State Information Technology Agency, or SITA. I think this is not a fit-for-purpose institution. It tries to centralize procurement of all IT contracts. Now, if you know anything about technology, you know technology is a bottom-up process. It's a decentralized process. That's how you innovate in this space. Unfortunately, South Africa has centralized all of this in SITA, and so we are having very urgent conversations to see how we can get around this problem, how we can deal with this issue, but also how it can be solved across government, because it's not only Home Affairs that has this problem. The South African Police Service, I'm sure Minister Mkhunu would desperately love to move away from those paper dockets. Can you imagine the impact that would have? We won't lose our dockets anymore because it will all be, as you say, secure and digitized. But we're all going to have the same problem if we don't deal with the regulations around SITA. So that is a bit of a frustration and a roadblock right now, I must be honest. But we are having very serious conversations internally and at a cabinet level to see how we can remove this roadblock. Then I think we'll see really quick movement in this direction.
Very interesting point around SITA, but let's just park that to the side for the time being. But I'd love to come back to that conversation at a later stage. Now, Minister, this week you faced backlash over the 50-odd million that was spent on the deportation of almost 20,000 illegal immigrants between April and August this year. So let's just hear your response to the backlash and also why, you think that people feel the way they do about the deportation of illegal foreigners who some would say very often are back the very next week. Your predecessor once said we are a country where the refugees in this country go home for Christmas and then they come back. So, it's a weird and wonderful situation. But talk to us about the money being spent to deport people who will be back the next day or the next week.
Well, of course, it is an extraordinary problem. And I think the important thing to say right off the bat is, and I think I may have said it on your program at some point, right at the beginning, there is no magic wand. I'm flattered if people think I have magic powers, but I don't. This is a problem that's been coming for decades. It has gotten worse as we've systematically removed resources from Home Affairs and the Border Management Authority, for example. Home Affairs only has 40% of the staff it requires. The BMA is underfunded by 4.5 billion rand. Those are decisions that are made at a cabinet level that have impacted over 30 years and created the kind of resource constraints we face right now, and indeed the situation that you describe. But I do think we need to also separate a couple of issues from one another here. I'm not sure what the alternative would be to deporting people who violate our immigration laws, because that is the constitutional mandate of the Department of Home Affairs. So any suggestion that Home Affairs should turn a blind eye or refuse to implement the law of this country will contribute to further undermining and weakening the rule of law in South Africa. So, of course, we need to deal with the issues that we have at our borders. And this is a multi-agency problem. Home Affairs manages the ports of entry, but it is Public Works that's managing the infrastructure. It is the Department of Defense that has the overall mandate for the sovereignty of the country. We work with the police, and we can't wait for all of those things to be solved until we deport people. If you violate South African law, there will be consequences. Now, I know people have talked about the cost associated with this. I had a look. It's 2,600 Rand per deportation. The vast majority of that comes from transport and the periods through which those people need to be housed. Remember, they need to go through a magistrate to get a deportation order. Now, and then if you look around the world, you'll find that a country like the United States spends around $20,000, that's almost 400,000 Rand, on every deportation. So, of course, this is resources we dearly love to use to build the digital system, for example, that I'm talking about. But I will not accept any argument that says we're going to fix the rule of law in South Africa by turning a blind eye to people who violate the law. That is not going to happen on my watch, and that's a message that needs to be clearly understood. If we want to restore the rule of law, we must implement our constitutional mandate.
Have you raised the issue in Cabinet, though, about the underfunding of the Border Management Authority as an example? Because if we are going to actually make any sort of inroads here, you need to get the funding so that you can plug the holes that currently allow for this system that's not working to continue.
Yes, absolutely. So we've presented a business case to Treasury that demonstrates very clearly the economic returns also that will follow from investments in the Border Management Authority. But at the moment, it's a bit like I have to play with both hands tied behind my back, and the same goes for the commissioner of the BMA, and that's not a sustainable situation. So it's really in the budget that we will see whether this issue is being prioritized. And I keep making the point, when politicians tell you that they are so concerned about immigration and the border management, ask them, why is there no budget for this? Because the budget actually reflects the real priority. And I most certainly am fighting every day to prioritize Home Affairs and the BMA so that we can address this problem. But at a collective level and at the level where money is allocated, that's where the rubber will meet the road. And so we must judge people who stand in the way of progress in this space when they pretend to care about border management, but they don't fight for the budget that needs to go with that. So I think that's an obvious thing that we need to watch going forward, Sakina. But certainly in all the discussions, the extended cabinet, everywhere that I go, this is the refrain that you will hear. If you want us to fix the problem, give us the resources and we can start making progress.
Minister, the current figure, the rate of asylum seekers or refugee status applications, are you able to give us a sense of where that stands?
Well, the biggest problem we've got in this space, Sakina, is actually a backlog created by Home Affairs over many years. And it's another example, unfortunately, of how we need to get our own house in order if we are to deal with the problems in this space. So we're sitting with appeals, people who have appealed against rulings that said that they are not legitimate asylum seekers. And that backlog has piled up for years now. We're talking about thousands of cases. And we need to get through that particular backlog if we want to move on this space. Now, the good news is that I've recently had a very constructive engagement with the High Commissioner of the UNHCR. They are very keen to assist South Africa with getting more adjudicators, getting more people to physically come in and work through this backlog. Sakina, in many ways, Home Affairs and the way that I inherited it is a department of backlogs. It's true in the asylum seeker space. It was true in the ID card space, and thankfully we've cleared that one of 250,000 within 1 month. We managed to clear that. And then, of course, in the visa space, there was a backlog of 306,000 applications that had been coming for a decade. I can happily report to you today that we've now done 70% of that visa backlog, which is just an incredible testament to the team that we've put together. We've eradicated the ID backlog. And now we need to move on this asylum seeker backlog as well. Again, money is the problem. We understand that it's probably not going to come from the South African fiscus. So that's why we're appealing to the international community to actually help us deal with an international problem in eradicating this backlog so that no one has an excuse to say that they are in South Africa because they're waiting for an application to be adjudicated. That's what we need to do. That's what South Africa needs to fix in order to deal with this particular problem.
Just a quick one, Minister. We are hopelessly out of time, but I quickly want to touch on the ZDPs for Zimbabweans. What is the status there? Because there's quite a bit of concern. We have questions every other day to ask what is happening with the ZDPs.
Well, as you know, there was a Constitutional Court judgment that said we need to properly consult on this issue. We cannot have predetermined outcomes in mind. The court was very clear about this. And so that is one of the key things that the Immigration Advisory Board will be dealing with. We're busy finalizing those appointments, hopefully within a matter of weeks, to get that board up and running. And then we will ask for their assistance to help us run a public consultation on the future of the ZDP. But in the meantime, of course, there are a number of waivers that have been in place for years that have enabled ZDP applicants to transition and apply for mainstream visas, where they have the same rights as anyone else in applying for those documents. And so I would again encourage people to make use of that opportunity, like any person from anywhere in the world, to apply if you think that there's a mainstream visa category that you can get. And then that obviously also will reduce the intensity of this problem with a special dispensation that, unfortunately, Sakina, let's be honest, was the outcome of a political decision 20 years ago, and that we now need to deal with the consequences of. And so that is the space in which we operate. I think the public consultation will have to guide us very clearly on where we move with that one.
I just wanted to get an update with regard to the former Miss South Africa contestant, Chida Adina. So, as you know, that was something that really caught the imagination of the country with fraudulent documents. So what is the latest update with regard to that?
Yes, let me just say I'm officially late for a cabinet meeting now, but I'm very happy to be with you for a few more minutes. Yes, so on that regard, I can indicate that we found the prima facie evidence of fraud in relation to the mother, or the person who was registered as the mother. We then wrote to her to indicate that we found this information and that we intend to cancel the resultant documents. There was no response, and therefore I can confirm that we've cancelled the fraudulent ID. She does not hold a South African passport. As far as we understand, she travels on a Mozambican passport. And so therefore that action has been taken. We've also then, subsequent to our mandate being fulfilled, referred that matter to the Hawks. And they are currently investigating, of course, on the criminal side of this particular case. So, as far as the Home Affairs mandate is concerned, that's the action we've taken. The ID is gone. There is no passport. And certainly on our system, the necessary locks have been put in place. As I said at the start, Sakina, we are absolutely committed to enforcing of law. That is distinct, of course, from inflaming issues or inflaming divisions or violence or anything of that nature. We will never engage in that. But we are unapologetic that where the law is broken, that is what will guide us in terms of our constitutional mandate, and that's exactly what we've done in this particular case.
So just a final question, Dr. Schreiber, that's the mother. What about Ms. Chida Adina herself? Did she leave the country? On what document did she leave the country? And also, as far as Home Affairs officials are concerned, were you able to pinpoint or at least make inroads in trying to establish who was responsible for issuing the fraudulent document?
Yes, unfortunately, in terms of the Home Affairs officials, because this happened, I think in 2001, don't quote me, I think it's either 2001 or 2003, some of the officials have actually passed away who were involved in this. The others have moved on, but we are still continuing to see if there are people inside. And we know that this happens. It's not a hypothetical. That's where the dismissals came from that I mentioned earlier, and where the prosecutions are coming from. But we're dealing with a very old case here, which is obviously limited on that particular front. I think in terms of Ms. Adina herself, as we outlined right at the start of our investigation, we could not find any complicity of her, of course, in fraud that was committed when she was an infant. I would not know where she is right now. I don't know if she's in South Africa or abroad because, of course, there's no finding against her. So we must be very careful to make sure that where we have evidence, and indeed in this particular case confirmed violations of the law, that's where we take action. But where we have people who were infants when those actions took place, or where we don't have the concrete evidence required to take action against someone, then the rule of law requires us, in fact, also to uphold the rights of those people. And so it's a differentiation that we've executed, I think, very effectively here. And of course, it's not over. We now are working with the Hawks to make sure if there need to be criminal consequences, we're looking at legal opinions to make sure that we can cover all bases, not only in this case, but most importantly, as we move forward into the digital future that we're talking about, to make sure that we close the gaps where people are able to commit these kind of fraud in the first instance.
Minister, thank you so much for your time. Apologies for letting you go late to that cabinet meeting, but we appreciate it. Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Leon Schreiber, speaking to us there about the state of the department and, of course, his first 100 odd days in office, and just answering some of the questions that viewers have posed as well.